For over a decade, I've been talking about how Invincible isn't just my favorite comic book of all time, but also my favorite work of fiction, period. Well, now that it's a hit animated show, Invincible is finally getting its due. But there's a catch. I can't really make videos about the series without spoiling it or just turning into a react channel. Now obviously, go read Invincible, it is amazing. And for those of you that are just watching the show, goddamn, you have no idea how much better it's about to get. But if you're craving more comics that capture a similar vibe, you've come to the right place. And who knows, maybe they'll get an animated series and become the next big thing, and you'll know all about it before anyone else does. I mean, one of them already seems to be going in that direction, and it looks sick as hell. You can find all of these books at your local comic shop, but for quick and convenient access, check out today's sponsor, GlobalComix. As someone who's been doing this for a decade, I have seen so many companies try to become the best digital comic platform, but I wholeheartedly think that GlobalComix takes the cake because of one crucial factor. They put the creators first. Not only do they have over 60,000 of the best indie comic series like Invincible, Scott Pilgrim, The Walking Dead, and Sunstone fully optimized for digital devices, but they just signed a deal with Dark Horse, so big names like Hellboy, Umbrella Academy, Cyberpunk, and Stranger Things are also here too. And the really cool thing is that there's these new exclusive vertical scrolling versions of comics that are available for free with new episodes each week. That being said, a subscription to GlobalComix gives you access to the full comic library and early access to new releases. But the best part is that your subscription dollars gets paid out to creators based on what you are reading. GlobalComix understands that if comics are going to become more popular, then you need to give power to the creators, while also making the comics affordable, easy to access, and convenient for readers. So if any of the comics that I talk about in this video sound like something that you want to read, then click the link in the description and use my code GCXComicBookDrake to get 33% off your first yearly subscription. Discover your new favorite comic, or even create your own. And who knows, maybe one day, I'll be covering it right here on the channel. But now, let's get back to it. Now, it might be a cop-out to start off with, but there are a bunch of other books that are set inside the Invincible universe, such as Invincible Universe. Seriously, there are so many great characters that don't get much of a spotlight in either the animated series or the comic itself, but in this book, they're given their time to shine, like one of the coolest heroes ever, Best Tiger. Not just good, best. He's Batman plus Daredevil plus guns. He's a martial arts master with contingencies to take down every member of the Guardians of the Globe, but he's arguably the greatest marksman in all of comics as well, by being capable of completely implausible yet badass trick shots. And he also once casually killed 7 ninjas with a single bullet. And he's able to do all of this while blindfolded because his senses are so great that he needs to handicap himself, so there's at least a little bit of a challenge. All of these little Invincible spin-offs like Invincible Universe, Guarding the Globe, and Invincible Presents are quick and easy reading that help flesh out the world. But if you want a book that's set within the universe that stands more on its own and delivers on a great story, then Astounding Wolf-Man is a ton of fun. He's a rich dude that got attacked by werewolves and is now able to turn into one himself. But thanks to training that was given to him by a mysterious vampire, he uses his fortune to build a secret lair and defends his city as the hero, Wolf-Man. Much like Invincible, Astounding Wolf-Man initially presents itself as your typical goofy superhero romp, but it goes dark just as fast, and it does the same thing of constantly dropping plot twists that subvert the reader's expectations. Oh, and it's also just as bloody. Plenty of characters from Invincible also make an appearance here, like Mark, Cecil, and Donald. Heck, even Art's back, and he's the one that designed Wolfman's armor. What I especially enjoy, though, is that Wolfman is a superhero story where the person who gets powers is already a grown-ass adult with a spouse and teenage kid. It is a very different dynamic from the teenagers and young adults who usually star in these stories, so the tension comes from places that we typically don't get to see in superhero media. Essentially, it is the perfect middle ground between Kirkman's 2 most popular series, Invincible and The Walking Dead. He's not trying to juggle fighting crime with studying for a chemistry test and finding a date for prom, and similarly, he's not worried about trying to pay rent or figure out his place in the world now that he's on his own for the first time. No, instead, Wolfman has to deal with his crumbling marriage and how, just as he and his wife were finally getting to a place where they could recover from and move past his wife's infidelity, Wolfman is framed for her murder and is forced to go on the run, and at the same time, his daughter starts training with a vampire lord so she can track him down to avenge her mother's death. Now look, I feel really bad that I had to give away some of the big reveals in order to make it clear that this book is actually interesting. Because yeah, hey, you should read this comic about a sad furry. I know that's not a good sell, but let me assure you that there is still plenty of stuff that I didn't mention that is still going to surprise you, and if you give this book a shot, I think you're going to love it. Jason Howard's style with these big, bold lines really lends itself to this plot, and it embodies that 2000s aesthetic of something like Archer and Ben 10, but with action that still feels kinetic and visceral. Astounding Wolf-Man would look so damn good as an animated series. But until then, consider giving it a read. But for the true successor to the Invincible legacy, look no further than Radiant Black. And don't just take my word for it. Robert Kirkman himself has directly called it, quote, the perfect superhero comic for anyone missing Invincible. The easiest way to describe this series is that it's Invincible meets Power Rangers, which makes a lot of sense considering that its writer, Kyle Higgins, is responsible for a truly legendary run on the Power Rangers comic. Radiant Black is about childhood friends Nathan and Marshall, who after a night out on the town come across a mysterious entity called a Radiant, which turns Nathan into a full-on superhero, complete with a suit and a whole slew of powers such as gravity manipulation. But eventually, we discover a whole gaggle of other Radiant users, each with their own unique abilities and motivations. The beautiful art by Marcelo Costa is dynamic and delivers the perfect blend of American superheroes and Japanese tokusatsu series like Power Rangers and Kamen Rider. But what truly makes Radiant Black special is how the creative team is determined to push past the boundaries of the comic book medium itself. Take issue 18 for instance. Because Radiant Yellow has the ability to see through time, his origin is told through 4 points in time all at once. And yeah, that's a really neat storytelling mechanic. However, because they are absolute mad lads, the creators also released the Infinite Edition, which is that entire issue but printed onto one large long spread. All 4 storylines all at once on one piece of paper that is taller than me. I'm like 5'10", and still, there's so much content. But also, take a look at this villain named Doppler who can weaponize sound. She's able to turn a triangle into a deadly attack, and the effect looks so damn cool. Seriously, I wish I looked this badass when I played the triangle back in middle school band. But the most important thing that truly makes Radiant Black into one of the best comics of all time is the sheer amount of heart. Issue 10 takes a deep dive into existence, and not only does it have this cool and trippy presentation, but it ends on a beautiful and impactful message about how you can't hate yourself into becoming a version of you that you like. And god damn it, that spoke to me. I've been making videos about comic books as my full-time job for 10 years, and after reading through thousands and thousands of issues, I have gotten burned out on this hobby multiple times. But Radiant Black is one of those few special series that lights a fire in me and constantly reminds me of why I love comic books in the first place. Radiant Black is more than just awesome poses and cool fight scenes. It is genuinely so fun to read, but it also exhibits such real and raw emotions that you can't help but get sucked in. Not just entertained, but somehow reborn. Together. Dazzling images on smooth glossy paper, punches and energy blasts that I can feel. Somehow, heartbreak feels good in a place like this. Even though it's become one of the most popular indie superhero comics to come out in ages, Radiant Black is still criminally underrated, and it is perfect for an animated adaptation. And if you want a taste for what that would look like, then check out the officially animated and fully voice-acted fight scene that was released right here on YouTube. Plus, Kyle Higgins is committed to making Radiant Black a full-on multimedia juggernaut by releasing an audiobook with big-name talent like Ryder Strong, Will Friedle, and Troy Baker. I mean, come on, Friedle was Terry McGinnis. That is 10 out of 10 casting right there.
Hey, I'm Radiant Black. Nah, don't freak out, but you're in the future.
What is this? What did you do?
Look, audiences are smart. Time travel's in. Spider-Verse won an Oscar.
I don't know what any of that means. Undo this.
To make things more interesting, Radiant Black was the start of a creator-owned universe called the Massiveverse, which I'm happy to report has been banger after banger after banger. Pretty much everybody involved with the Massiveverse had worked with Kyle on Power Rangers, so a lot of these comics share the same tokusatsu inspiration as Radiant Black. But what I really respect is that the teams are dedicated to making sure that every comic stands on its own. You do not need to read any other Massiveverse comics to understand what is going on in any given series. And instead of constantly shoving difficult to follow crossovers in your face, the writers just do one special crossover story a year, which they call Supermassive. There are multiple books in the Massiveverse, but the other main one that I want to highlight today is Rogue Sun. Written by Ryan Parrott and illustrated by Abel, this book focuses on the magic side of the universe. See, there's this delinquent kid named Dylan whose estranged dad was the superhero protector of New Orleans, but when he was killed in combat, he left the source of his power, the Sunstone, to Dylan. You get it? Rogue Sun. It's a pun. After walking out on Dylan and his mother, his dad got rich and set up a whole new life for himself, which includes having 2 more kids, both of which are pissed because they assumed that they would be the ones to eventually inherit the rogue son legacy. But because he died while wearing the suit, Dylan's dad's soul is bound within it, so he's trying to mentor Dylan and urge him to solve his murder. But naturally, Dylan wants nothing to do with him, and that is where we get the biggest bombshell. Dylan was not chosen to be his dad's successor because he believes in him or he's trying to build the relationship that they never had. No, he did it specifically because the next rogue son would likely be in serious danger. So in order to protect the kids that he actually loves, Dylan was made the heir to the Sunstone. Just gonna switch mugs real quick. What a dick. The 2 of them strike a deal. If his dad teaches him how to properly harness the power of the Sunstone, then he'll avenge his death. But in exchange, his dad will have to sever their connection so Dylan can enjoy his newfound powers in peace. That is an amazing premise for a book, and for the love of God, please go buy it. An easy place to start would be this really awesome book called Across the Massiverse, which collects the first issue of each series, including Radiant Black and Rogue Sun, all in one place, so you can get a feel for the whole Massiverse without spending an arm and a leg on books that you don't know if you'll even like. But let's be real, you'll probably love them all because, again, these books are all damn good and have some insanely killer art. If you want me to make a dedicated, massive deep dive, then let me know down there in the comments. And while you're at it, why not subscribe? If Omni-Man is your favorite character in Invincible and you want something that focuses on a group of heroes trying to defeat an evil Superman, then you might like Irredeemable by Mark Waid. This comic is full-on destruction porn, with the world's greatest hero, the Plutonian, snapping and making it his mission to destroy the world. This dude vaporizes anyone that looks at him the wrong way, throws meteor-sized chunks of diamond at the Earth from space, pushes Singapore into the ocean with his bare hands, and even heat visions his emblem all across North America. Irredeemable is a truly hopeless series, where the few remaining heroes exhaust every option they have left at fighting back, and they make small victories which eventually blow up in their faces. With the Plutonian being this unstoppable force, the true nature of the protagonists bubble up to the surface. You know how the best zombie series are about how people are the true monsters when we're pushed to their limits? Yeah, that's the entire book, plus superpowers. I personally think this comic drags a bit near the end, and I get the vibe that Mark Waid thought that this was way more profound than it really was, but before evil Superman became a done-to-death trope, this was something novel. At the very least, this comic does a really good job at diving into the Plutonian's childhood and showing just how difficult it would be to actually grow up with extraordinary powers. Like, simply holding his newborn baby brother too closely caused the Plutonian to inflict lifelong damage. Constantly walking around in a world made out of cardboard would be enough to wind up anybody so tight that they would become a ticking time bomb just waiting for that final straw to break the camel's back. I also have to say that this comic has a really touching final issue, because even though Mark Waid is trying to write the most irredeemable monster to ever exist, he still understands what makes Superman such a powerful icon. I mean, hell, this is the guy that wrote Kingdom Come after all. Very few people get Superman like Mark Waid. So yeah, it's a little bit too over-the-top edgy, some moments don't age well, and it's not a book that I'm personally looking forward to ever reading again, but if you want more evil Superman, you could do a lot worse. Now, around the same time that Invincible was getting popular, Image Comics released another superhero book called Dynamo 5, written by Jay Fabier and illustrated by Mohamed A. Assar. This book is about the world's greatest hero, Captain Dynamo, who is known for his 5 powers: laser vision, super strength, flight, shapeshifting, and telepathy. Only problem, though, is that he was killed, and when his widow, Maddie, was going through his belongings at his secret base, she discovered his little black book. Yup, Captain Dynamo was cheating on her this entire time. And to make things worse, when word got out that Dynamo kicked the bucket, his supervillains went on an unstoppable rampage. So, in an attempt to stop them, Maddie went through her late husband's list of affairs and tracked down his 5 illegitimate children to assemble them into a super team, with each one of them having just one of his powers. What I really love about this book is that all of the kids are extremely different from one another. They're all various ages and were raised in radically different households, so they have these clashing perspectives and personalities. It essentially takes the idea of a family team like the Fantastic Four and mashes it with the found family trope of something like the X-Men. It's an interesting combination that I haven't seen done before. It's also tough because Maddie is a total hard-ass when she leads the team, and I mean, who could blame her? It's difficult to try and bring such conflicting people together and turn them into a well-oiled machine, but it's gotta be extra taxing to be in constant contact with your dead husband's illegitimate children. Something I do find really cool though is that Dynamo 5 intentionally breaks down tropes and stereotypes for how its powers are distributed. For instance, Gage, the muscle-bound football player, gets telepathy. In his normal life, he exclusively relies on his strength, but that doesn't mean too much when you're going up against people with super strength. He's not very smart or emotionally intelligent, so it's a real challenge for him to get a handle on his newfound powers, which are all about being intelligent and emotionally vulnerable. And because this was during the era where Image was trying to have their own interconnected superhero universe, Invincible and Omni-Man also make appearances. So hey, at the very least, you get more Invincible content if you read this. But for as much as I love indie comics, I know that there's still plenty of y'all that are more interested in mainstream stuff. You want your Marvel and DC. Well, for that, you can't go wrong with another Kirkman classic, Irredeemable Ant-Man. It's about a real scumbag named Eric O'Grady who got his hands on an Ant-Man suit and uses it to spy on women in the shower, save women from danger in order to extort them for dates that they'll pay for, and then hook up with his dead best friend's grieving girlfriend on top of his grave. It also has some of the most wild product placement that I have ever seen in a comic, by going super over the top and making sure that Old Spice makes an appearance on every single page. Outside of Robert Kirkman being the writer, the reason that I bring up Irredeemable Ant-Man here is because it focuses a lot on the fringes of the Marvel Universe. And much like how Invincible loves to show things off like where the supersuits come from, or the behind the scenes of government-backed teams, this book heavily features stuff like low-level shield work, and the superhuman cleanup crew, Damage Control. But sure, I get it, Eric is the least popular Ant-Man, so even though this book is severely underrated, it's not really mainstream, even though it's made by Marvel. Look, just go read Ultimate Spider-Man by Brian Michael Bendis. It's not bloody or raunchy like Invincible, but it's one of the best superhero coming-of-age stories. It's the first of Marvel's self-contained Ultimate Universe, so you don't need to worry about any pre-existing continuity going in. And considering that this book is what most Spider-Man anything has been based on for the past 2 decades, you're probably going to love it. It is considered to be one of the greatest superhero comics of all time for a reason. Look, just go read some damn comic books. There are hundreds and hundreds of great stories that are just waiting for you to uncover them, especially when you get outside the worlds of Marvel and DC. I have already convinced thousands of you guys to pick up Invincible over the years, and I really hope this video is going to encourage you to find your next favorite comic as well. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully, I'll see you next time. Like and subscribe.